I'm Shaun Haney, and this is Real Ag on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. Real Ag on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to Real Ag on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com, also host of the Real Ag Radio podcast. It is great to be with you here on this weekend. Hope you're having yourself a great time. You're running out of days for Christmas shopping. It is ticking away. It's amazing. And maybe it just feels because some of the weather, we haven't exactly had winter yet for the most part. On the Western Canadian prairies, we've had days where, there's winter, but for the most part, it's been kind of mild. I was talking to Chris Marley, who farms in Tisdale, on Thursday, and he was talking to me about how, there's just no snow on the ground, period. And, there's an example for that area where, we would have quite a bit of snow in the flat by this point. So there's lots of areas, I think, in Saskatchewan that are really looking for some more moisture at this time, and still time. We don't lose a crop in December, right? We don't. And maybe a bit of a brown Christmas, which it's been a while. I think Chris said in those parts, 1998 was the last time they were like this. Now, other areas are going to say, well, we've had it, we get brown Christmases way more frequently than that. In where I am in southern Alberta, definitely a brown Christmas. There's no question about that for sure. Okay, today on Real Ag on the Weekend, we are going to cover a number of different topics. Looking forward to it. We're going to talk to Dennis Laycraft. He's Executive Vice President with the Canadian Cattle Association. I want to talk to Dennis about trade related to beef. And there's growing discussions, again, south of the border in the United States, related to country of origin labeling of some sort. Now, this is happening on two different fronts, the product of the USA label changes, as well as, some voluntary label changes regarding country of origin. Numerous bills being pushed forward from some different points of view. They're all a little bit different. Dennis is going to talk about the Canadian response to this and what has changed. Do those WTO retaliation measures still... is that still a card yet to be played potentially by Canada? And we'll find out about that. And I'm also concerned, to be honest with you, about the upcoming 2026. And you're like, Shaun, it's 2023. Why are you worried about something in 2026? But I think the cards are lining up for the renegotiation of the CUSMA, the USMCA, or just new NAFTA, however you want to put that free trade agreement. Remember we said we would have a sunset clause to it and we would open it back up again to relook at the agreement? That seems like, I think all roads point to a very, very contentious affair for numerous reasons. So I'll talk to Dennis about that as well. We're also going to talk today about the importance of pulses in your rotation. We're going to do that. And I also want to talk to you about a new farm group, a producer group survey we just put out with RealAgristudies and why I am so excited about it. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can definitely send me an email. My email address is shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all different social media platforms. Make sure you're following 650 CKOM and 980 CGME on their social media platforms as well. You can also call the Real Ag feedback line. All you do is dial the number, press the number 3 after you do that, and you leave me a voicemail. That is 855-776-6147. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague at Real Agriculture, Kelvin Heppner. He's going to dig in here on the importance of the benefits, I guess, of pulses in the rotation and what happens after that. He's talking to Brodie Erb. Here's their conversation.
All right, joining us here on Real Agriculture for this episode of the Pulse School, we're pleased to welcome Brodie Erb. Brodie is a research technician and master's student at the University of Manitoba, and he has a poster on display as part of the Manitoba Agronomists Conference taking place at the U of M this week. Brodie, can you fill us in on your research looking at peas and some of the, I guess, factors that producers, that growers are taking into consideration at this time of year as they look ahead to another growing season and laying out those plans for growing a big pea crop next year?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the recent last decade, we've seen pea acreage increase back to levels that were seen in the late 90s. And this is the result of, different marketing options or opportunities for growers. They also fit into crop rotations, and I think producers are starting to look for a greater diversity of crop rotations. So we are starting to see a higher acreage of peas. And so my research is focusing on agronomic factors of pea production and to kind of suss out best management practices for pea growth. And so the three of these factors include preceding residue. So I'm looking at wheat or canola residue. The second one is residue management strategy. So whether that's tillage or zero till. And the third one is starter phosphorus application method. So that's no phosphorus, side banded phosphorus, or seed placed phosphorus. Currently, there's no standardization for all three of these factors when it comes to pea production in Manitoba. For preceding residue, for example, based on some surveys, we see that peas are grown on wheat stubble about 30% of the time and canola stubble about 35% of the time. And this makes sense because canola and wheat are the major crops grown in Manitoba. Another example for the tillage aspect is we're starting to see more producers go towards the zero tillage practices based on some of the benefits that this system has on their overall production, including soil physical properties, less fuel consumption, that sort of thing. And then the third example, starter phosphorus applications, based on other surveys, about 90% of producers do apply phosphorus with the seed as a starter phosphorus application. But whether that's side banded or seed placed, that's usually split in half, about 50-50. So my research is trying to combine all of these factors into and try to stream them into a better, higher producing pea crop.
So you have research now from the past 3 years, and preceding residue looks like it's the clear most impactful of those three factors over those 3 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So my research has been done on 6 different site years. So 3 sites at Carman, or 3 years at Carman, and 3 years at Roblin. So far, I've only analyzed the Carman data, but based on that preliminary data, it would seem that pea yield has been most affected by preceding residue as opposed to the other 2 factors.
And that's where wheat's growing peas on wheat, you've had a clear yield advantage over growing it on canola stubble?
Yeah, that's right. So in 2021 and in 2023, peas significantly yielded better on wheat stubble rather than canola stubble. And in the other year, not significantly, but peas did out yield on wheat residue in that year as well.
Okay. Do you have any theory, or is there any, in terms of your diving into the literature that's out there, as to why peas may fare better on wheat than on canola?
Yeah, so peas are a mycorrhizal crop, meaning that they have an association with mycorrhizae in the soil as a mechanism to increase phosphorus uptake to the plant roots. Wheat is also a host for mycorrhizae. Canola is a non-mycorrhizal crop. So the thought process with that is that peas grown on wheat stubble should out yield peas grown on canola stubble because of that association and because of that greater networking opportunity following wheat stubble.
Okay. Getting to the other 2 factors that you've looked at, residue management, not much of a difference there in terms of, or a significant difference, I guess, in terms of yield between the different approaches to residue management?
Yeah, that's right. So in one of the years in 2021, there was a significant effect of tillage strategy or residue management strategy. And that was the peas peas that were planted into or direct seeded out yielded peas that were on tilled stubble. The reason why, I'm not so certain. There was, if you can remember, 2021 had a pretty dry spring. So the moisture in direct seeded systems may have been greater for peas to establish better earlier in the year. And then the other 2 years, there was no significant effect of residue management strategy on pea yield.
Okay. What about starter phosphorus? Any significant learnings there in terms of or differences in yields as a result of giving it that treatment?
Yeah, so like I said, I tried no phosphorus application, starter phosphorus that was seed place, and a starter phosphorus that was side banded, and these applications were at 20 pounds of phos per acre. Based on the preliminary results at Carmen, there was no significant effect between these 3 phosphorus applications.
That was RealAgriculture's Kelvin Heppner talking to master's student at the University of Manitoba, Brodie Erb. That is a piece of audio from one of our recent Pulse Schools. You can find by going to pulseschool.com. Of course, the Pulse School is brought to you by BSF Canada. Okay, let's take a break, and when we come back on RealAg on the weekend, we're going to dig in on a new producer group survey that we've sent out. I'm looking forward to the results, and I'll tell you why. Here on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup to weed control, field trial results, and the latest yield strategies. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast in your favorite podcast app. Check out the latest Corn School episode today.
This segment of RealAg on the weekend is brought to you by the new Oxbow cereal broadleaf herbicide from New Farm. Oxbow is powered by duplasm technology that is a workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds in wheat and barley. You can find out more by going to newfarm.ca. Shaun Haney, your host here of RealAg on the weekend from RealAgriculture.com. Make sure you stop by that website here while you're trying to keep up to speed on what's happening in Canadian agriculture over the weekend. I would really appreciate that. And make sure you sign up for our emails by going to RealAgriculture.com/subscribe. Okay, so RealAgristudies, the market research arm of RealAgriculture, which I've talked about here on the show before. This would be last week. We sent out a new study that we're doing. And this is really interesting because a lot of times we're looking at issues as they impact your farm business. You're asking about your health of your current farm financial situation, your future farm financials, how sensitive you are to interest rates, things that actually really impact your farm. This time what we're doing, though, is really trying to get farmers' perspective related to their relationship, their opinion, their interaction, the value, the area of improvement, the areas where things need to change, all related to farm groups. Okay, producer groups. So whether you're a pork producer, beef, or cash cropper, you're just growing wheat and peas and canola versus you're somebody that's maybe has a mixed farm, all types, all shapes, all sizes. You somehow interact with farm groups, right? Now that could be checkoff organizations, right? That could be like a checkoff organization. An example is SAS Pulse or SAS Canola. Or there's membership groups like APAS, for example, or maybe it's the Western Wheat Growers, right? There's lots of different options. Those are membership groups versus checkoffs. And it's not a versus situation. There's just different types of groups that represent the interests of farmers. And all those stakeholders, all those groups have different stakeholders and different people that they are thinking about on a daily basis. So what we're trying to do, though, is close some gaps. And it's get a better understanding about how the farmer views these organizations, and what's their interaction with them. What should they be? What should the priorities be for those organizations? Extension and research versus advocacy, as an example. Okay, but also, when I talk to farm groups, there's a lot of questions around. What are you hearing from farmers? What do you think farmers think is the future of farm groups? Could we see consolidation or more consolidation into the future? There's a lot of questions to be asked, and I am so excited because since sending out this survey, okay, we have over, I think it's like close to 500 people that have already completed it. So it's pretty cool. Now, if you're interested in completing it, you can either send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, and I'll send you the link. Or you can go to RealAgristudies.com and sign up to be a part of our RealAgristudies Insights panel. So it's pretty cool. I think this is going to be very, very valuable because it's beneficial to the farmer because your voice is being heard on these matters. And I don't think we're going to have where 100% of people believe this or 100% of people believe that. I think there's a whole bunch in between, but I think it really serves everybody because it helps the farm groups make improvements and farmers get better value. And there's things that I think that everybody would say farm groups do really, really well. And there's things I think they should do this. I think this would be better. Now, that may be different than what you have to say. There's also an open-ended section in the survey as well, which really, really does provide the opportunity for you. Like if something wasn't covered in terms of the questions, you can provide your perspective on some of this stuff. And we've had some very thoughtful comments. Pretty cool. I'm really excited about this one because this is a needle mover. This isn't just providing information to you about here's where we are at this very moment. This is actually the kind of information that allows for change and improvement. And when I say change, it's not fixing stuff that's terrible. It's even improving on some of the things that the farm groups you're interacting with are doing a really good job. We've got some really good people in farm group leadership. And everybody's always looking, just like you try to improve your farm. I think farm groups are looking to improve what they do for farmers. So this is, I'm pretty passionate about this one, and I'm pretty excited. So I'm really looking forward to it and we've had a lot of farm groups reach out because people know that we're doing this study, and there's a lot of interest. So make sure your voice is heard. Like I said, send me that email, shaney@realagriculture.com, and I will make sure that I get you that survey link to participate in the RealAgristudies Insights panel. Okay, I think we better take a break. And when we come back, we're going to dig in with Dennis Laycraft. He is the Executive Vice President with CCA, and we're going to talk about beef labeling rules in the U.S. because it's stirring up again. What's Canada's response? And how does all of this fit together when it comes to our free trade agreement renegotiation coming up in 2026? We'll talk about that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
The next generation is the future of agriculture, but how do we launch from one role to leading? From succession planning and family dynamics to understanding finances and making the tough calls to discovering paths others have taken all through agriculture, the Successors Podcast covers it all. Tune in with me, your host, Kara Oosterhuis, simply by searching The Successors on your favorite podcast platform, or you can find it by visiting www.realagriculture.com.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
This segment of RealAg on the Weekend is brought to you by FP Genetics. Innovative seed genetics for Canadian farmers. Contact your local FP seed dealer or territory manager to discuss your certified seed strategy. Here's the part, specific to your region. That is so key when it comes to choosing the right variety. Visit fpgenetics.ca to learn more. Joined right now by Dennis Laycraft, Executive Vice President with the Canadian Cattle Association. Dennis, great to chat with you again.
Yeah, morning. It's always great to visit, Shaun.
Yeah. Okay. So, Dennis, I don't have enough fingers to count how many, or toes for that matter, to count how many times we've talked about beef labeling. Give us an update on this file, because I've been reading more and more U.S. media discussing a lot of the push in the U.S. again from some groups to have some sort of origin beef labeling, whatever that kind of looks like. What's the update on this file? How concerned should Canadians be?
Well, first of all, I'll start by describing it's kind of our version of the never-ending story.
Yeah.
Two things are happening in 2024. There's still a lot of work going on the Farm Bill, which should have been completed in 2023. In Farm Bill years, there's always some strange trade-offs that occur. What we're hearing is that's likely to get extended rather than a new Farm Bill being approved.
Yes.
So that's kind of on one side. Then, of course, 2024 is election year. And there are a couple of very close races in the Senate in particular. And a number of those have been very vocal on country of origin labeling. So that's driving some of the media attention that is going. Generally, what we're hearing in the U.S. industry is there continues to be a strong support from many of our allies to oppose anyone trying to bring back mandatory country of origin labeling. And we've had people that have been attending the state meetings, visiting with them. We've been in Texas, in Nebraska, in Kansas, in Montana, in the Dakotas. Again, meeting with our counterparts in the United States at the state level, and just came back from meetings with the National Cattle and Beef Association and the American Meat Institute. And, like ourselves, they're keeping a close eye on it. The U.S. industry was actually hurt by the previous policy along with us. It really didn't generate any benefits on either side. So the other piece that is moving forward is the voluntary product of USA regulations. And what we're hearing is that it is likely to come out of what they call the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, sometime early in 2024. Now that's proposing a really onerous, it's even more than born, raised, and slaughtered in the US. It's pretty much conceived, born, raised, slaughtered, and processed in the US to qualify for that label. What we don't know after ourselves, Government of Canada, and others submitted comments is whether there were any changes made to the proposed regulation. And then the second thing is when would it come into effect? By that, usually there's a transition period with any significant change. And that opens the door up to a whole range of things that, there are there's some questions with even how the regulation was created that we're looking into. But in any event, that one is coming forward. We're watching, and the first question is, would it start to lead to segregation again? And if it did, there is an argument that it's another, if it's widely adopted, you can talk about a de facto mandatory. And in both cases, we've retained our retaliation rights under the WTO as a deterrent from anyone bringing in a policy that would negatively impact the movement of live animals between the U.S. and Canada and the U.S. and Mexico.
Yeah, it's in the Product to USA label. I think as it initially when this started, there's clearly some need for some reform in terms of some of those rules, and it was mainly around Central and South America in terms of what qualified as product of USA. And as many predicted, what's happened in that process is it's swept all of this together, and now it's it's about who has the leverage to get what they want out of this. All of this kind of runs a little bit counter to whether it's the spirit or what's actually written from a trade deal perspective with CUSMA and the USMCA, is it not?
Yeah, it certainly runs against the spirit of that. And the Secretary of Agriculture has said he is committed to ensure whatever they do is trade compliant or compliant with the WTO. So at least we're hearing the right things there. I think as we work closely with our allies, the message everybody is bringing is North America is much stronger because of the market integration that we have. When we go through extreme weather events, we were bringing feed north and we were taking feed south. And our ability to service the growing Asian markets creates, great opportunities for both Canada and the United States. And the challenge is, how do we maintain as much of the cattle herd as we can with some of the weather events? So market integration has actually helped do that. So we're really talking a lot about the benefits of the trade and how it actually makes North America and the supply chain much stronger by working together. So on one hand, there's going to be a bigger conversation. We're approaching the review of the Canada-US-Mexico agreement, and you're hearing different takes on it, but a lot of the conversation is about how do we improve it moving forward? How do we get better regulatory cooperation? And then on the other hand, you got the politics that you're talking about. And, we're seeing that even into government procurement in the U.S., pushing it back to more of a born and raised and slaughtered in the U.S. So you've got kind of these two forces at work down there. And it's, I think, common sense, if it prevails, should take us towards the benefits of trade and the market integration. But common sense is something that you don't want to just assume that's going to happen.
So I was just curious, you mentioned allies. Have you had to reconsider who the because it's not about political sides of the aisle. There are Republicans, there are Democrats. Just look at the Senate race in Montana. But, Senator John Tester is in a very, very tight fight. He's got Matt Rosendale after him. He's got Sheehy after him. And they're all kind of supporting the same thrust, just kind of looking a little bit different in terms of really this whole idea of putting a USA label and saying, and really trying to limit potentially, and you mentioned the word segregation, really trying to maybe force some sort of segregation of some of these animals, no matter what. And it's kind of surprising in an important Senate race like Montana that this is like one of the biggest issues that is being discussed right now, is where you stand on beef labeling. It's kind of bizarre to me a little bit.
If you look at the history around this. I mean, that's kind of the region into there and into, that sort of the Dakotas,
Yep.
Wyoming, Montana, where our calf got started. So this isn't anything particularly new in that region. A lot of the people that we work closely with are, as I mentioned, we have good relations with many producers in, Kansas, Nebraska, Texas, Washington State, and we visit with a lot of them as we move around. You're seeing a lot more feeder cattle, for instance, from Virginia coming up into Ontario, and they attend the Ontario meeting every year. So, Montana being close, you're probably going to hear more coming out of that than what you're going to hear from many of the other states that are down there, where you're going to hear a very different conversation that's taking place. So, this, again, as I said, it's something that we watch closely, and it continues to bubble around there. But right now, I think the threat meter is still reasonably manageable. We're not overly worried about it, but again, you always are more watchful during an election year, because it will get more conversation around this. And to the average person, without looking into the issue, it might sound good on the surface until they have a look at it and see how onerous the actual rule was. If you look back to USDA's own analysis, they estimated it was, if they'd have maintained the mandatory country of origin labeling the way it was previous enacted, it would have cost the U.S. industry over $8 billion over a 10-year period. There's no benefit. It would have cost $8 billion. So again, there's a lot of people remember that this was actually a bad policy for both the U.S. and Canada, and Mexico as well. So that is part of the conversation.
We've got more coming up in my discussion with Dennis Laycraft of the CCA. You're listening to Real Ag on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Smith of RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern for The Agronomists, Canada's only live, interactive, agronomy-based show. Each week, we answer your most pressing questions with a rotating panel of agronomists, researchers, and extension staff from across Canada. Join me Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, or head to realagriculture.com/live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
Here on Real Ag on the Weekend, to wrap up, we're going to continue our conversation with Dennis Laycraft of CCA. To wrap up here, you mentioned the renegotiation of the CUSMA/USMCA agreement coming in 2026, and there's not a lot of clarity on what that's actually going to look like, or who the particular. We've got federal elections in both countries, before then, so we could have some new players or maybe some old ones, depending on what happens. You mentioned trying to improve the agreement. Dennis, what I've heard from a lot of people on both sides of the border is this is going to be potentially a real big battle to keep what's actually there, which kind of feels kind of familiar to the NAFTA renegotiation. That all in the face of former President Trump saying, hey, if I'm reelected, I'm putting a 10% tariff on any incoming good coming into the U.S. That kind of gives me a little bit of shivers. Canada's up for a big battle here potentially.
Well, it's I think too early to really predict how that dynamic is going to unfold. Remember, it was Trump who was instrumental in renegotiating Kuzma, and he, considered it the gold standard for trade agreements. So I'm not as concerned there. He's already had his hand on its creation and talks very positively about it. The 10% tariff is another discussion which obviously everyone needs to be paying attention to. But again, this is pretty early on in this political conversation, heading towards 2024 in November. So it gets back to really spending a lot of time and working with many people talking about all of the benefits of the Canada-US trading relationship. And we've got the largest two-way trade of any two countries in the world. And even in agriculture, if you break it down to a per capita basis, it works out that we import about $600 worth of US agri-food products, and they import about $60 worth of Canadian agri-food products on a per capita basis. I don't think you could find a better trading partner you can't anywhere in the planet. So we have a lot of work to do. There's also, it's one of the great success stories in trade, and we need to not take that for granted, which is why we're going to spend a lot of time traveling to US meetings and having that positive conversation.
Do you think it's critical that Canada doesn't walk into that that NAFTA renegotiation with Bill 282 in hand?
Well, we're already hearing that they intend to have a conversation around dairy, and they obviously just lost a panel decision. So we're very concerned about 282. That's part of our conversation. You can't put 90% of agriculture at risk by preventing any conversation around the other 10%. And the federal government has done a very, very good job of protecting supply management. It doesn't mean this throws out or leaves the SM5 without protection. It just at least allows for the negotiations and conversations to occur. So, and if every country in the world decided they had a few sensitive products and they're going to legislate that they could never be talked about in a trade agreement, we wouldn't have access to beef in most of Asia. We wouldn't have had access to many other products in many countries of the world. That's got to be one of the most regressive trade discussion or decisions if it moves forward in the last 30 years.
We've been talking to Dennis Laycraft, Executive Vice President with the Canadian Cattle Association. Dennis, thanks for joining us here, filling us in, and look forward to future conversations indeed.
Yeah, always great to visit, and all the best for the holiday season.
Merry Christmas. I'm going to disagree a little bit with Dennis Laycraft there. I believe it's not too early. I believe Canada needs to be really, really working hard now and preparing for what could be a very, very tough renegotiation. We got U.S. Dairy not happy that they lost the second dispute panel on the market access with the TRQs. They're coming for market access and changes, maybe not necessarily a percentage increase, well they might, but also some changes there. We've got Canada trying to put in Bill 282 to somehow, with a house of sticks, protect supply management from being renegotiated. We've got right now, if you look at the polls right now, and it could change, but former President Trump is really the favorite right now to come back as president. Who knows who the Canadian leader is? Right now, the polls would show you it is Pierre Poilievre. Poilievre versus Trump. That's not going to be an easy task for Mr. Poilievre at all. There's a lot of stuff lining up here that is of great concern. I'll continue to talk about it over the next 3 years. If you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected here on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME with Real Ag on the Weekend.